Rolex is facing its biggest internal storm in years in relation to the Submariner, one of Rolex's most iconic models, a symbol of precision, luxury, and status. Until now, nobody dared to question what really goes on behind the brand's facade. But one former Rolex employee is speaking out, and the truth they reveal is shaking the watch world to its core. Rolex produces around 1.2 million watches annually, yet the Submariner is one of the hardest to actually get. Months-long waitlists are normal, and some dealers report that certain models barely see the floor before being snapped up. But according to the ex-employee, some of the scarcity isn't natural demand. It's carefully orchestrated. Inside sources reveal that certain quality control shortcuts, undocumented modifications, and manufacturing inconsistencies were happening behind the scenes. Procedures that Rolex reportedly insists remain standard, but is actually seen as risky for both buyers and the brand's reputation. Watches may have been leaving the factory with issues that were not properly corrected, or sometimes ignored. This isn't a rumor. It's a rare glimpse inside the machinery of a company that usually never lets anyone see behind the curtain. We're breaking down the shocking truths an ex-employee exposed about the brand, the internal practices that could tarnish Rolex's reputation, and why competitors are paying close attention. The brand may not be as perfect as you think after all. The birth of the Submariner. The Rolex Submariner is one of the most famous wristwatches ever made, known around the world as a benchmark for diving watches and a symbol of luxury and precision. It was first introduced by Rolex in 1953, making it one of the early professional tool watches designed specifically for people who went underwater to explore or work. When it launched, it was the first diver's wristwatch that was waterproof to 100 meters, a remarkable feat at the time and a major advancement in watchmaking technology. The history of the Submariner begins in a period when recreational and professional diving was becoming more popular. Rolex saw a need for a reliable timepiece that could help divers track how long they had been submerged without risking the watch being damaged by water. The result was the Submariner's Oyster Case, a design that built on Rolex's earlier innovations in waterproofing that started with the Oyster line in the 1920s. From the beginning, the watch combined incredible water resistance with the robust, functional look that would come to define its entire line. Throughout the 1950s and beyond, Rolex continued to improve the Submariner's depth rating. From 100 meters it went to 200 meters, and eventually to the 300 meters, which is 1,000 feet, that modern models can now withstand. The design of the Rolex Submariner has classic elements that have been carried forward with only subtle evolution over more than 60 years. Early Submariner references, such as the had straight, pencil-style hands and a rotating bezel, a dial with luminous markers so the time could be read easily in low light, and a screw-down winding crown to help keep water out. Over the years, Rolex added crown guards around the winding crown, changed the bezel materials, and adjusted hand and marker styles, but the overall aesthetic remained the same. An important physical component of the modern Submariner is its unidirectional, rotatable bezel. This bezel moves only in one direction, allowing a diver to measure elapsed time spent underwater. If the bezel were accidentally moved, it could only shorten the elapsed dive time being measured, which is a safety feature for divers. The bezel insert is made from Rolex's patented Cerachrom ceramic, which is extremely hard, virtually scratch-proof, and resistant to the fading effects of sunlight. The markers and numerals on the bezel are usually coated with precious metals, like for durability and legibility. The watch's Oyster Case is built from particularly strong materials. Many Submariner models use oyster steel, a corrosion-resistant alloy that Rolex first adopted in the 1980s, and that is also used in demanding environments such as aerospace and chemical industries. Luxury versions of the Submariner use 18-karat yellow gold or white gold, which Rolex casts in its own foundry, giving them both strength and distinctive radiance. Inside the watch, the Submariner is powered by automatic, self-winding mechanical movements entirely developed by Rolex. Latest models use calibers like the 3230 for the no-date version and the 3235 for the Submariner date. These movements have features such as a parachrom hairspring that resists shocks and magnetic fields, and a chronergy escapement that enhances energy use. Modern Submariner movements typically offer a power reserve of about 70 hours, meaning the watch can keep running even if it is not worn for a few days. The Submariner's dial is designed for easy reading in challenging conditions. It features large, luminescent hour markers and hands coated with a material called chromalite that glows in low light or underwater, helping divers read the time at great depths or in darkness. The familiar shapes of the markers, triangles, circles, and rectangles, are characteristic of Rolex's professional watches and help prevent confusion between hour and minute indications. Another hallmark of the Submariner is its bracelet and clasp system. Most modern Submariners are fitted with the Oyster bracelet, a three-piece metal link design developed in the 1930s and valued for both comfort and strength. The clasp often includes an Oyster lock safety system that prevents accidental opening, and a glide lock extension system that allows the wearer to adjust the bracelet length easily, even over a diving suit, without tools. In terms of features, the Submariner commonly includes a date function in many versions, visible through a small window at the 3 o'clock position with a magnifying Cyclops lens that makes the date easier to read. Not all Submariner models have a date feature. The no-date versions appeal to buyers who prefer a cleaner, more symmetrical dial. Both versions, however, share the same core qualities: a 300-meter water resistance rating, a highly legible dial, a robust and corrosion-resistant case, and a dependable automatic movement. The price of a Rolex Submariner varies widely depending on the exact model, materials used, and whether the watch is new or pre-owned. In recent years, official recommended retail prices for new models have been around $9,000 to $12,000 United States dollars. Stainless steel versions with green bezels or two-tone steel and gold combinations tend to be priced higher, and precious metal models can cost significantly more, some exceeding $40,000 United States dollars in retail price. Secondary market prices are frequently higher than official retail due to strong demand and limited availability. And pre-owned prices for many Submariners typically range from about $9,000 to over $15,000 United States dollars, depending on condition, age, and model. But even though Rolex is a respected brand around the world, that does not mean it hasn't faced its fair share of problems and scandals. Allegations concerning Rolex restorations. Rolex has always been seen as one of the greatest watchmakers in the world. Many people pay huge sums of money to own a Submariner because it is seen as nearly perfect in design and quality. The company behind the watch, Rolex, is famous for precision and strict quality control. But in the world of luxury watches, something strange and worrying has come to light. A number of issues show that even Rolex, the giant of watchmaking, has problems in its own systems, especially when it comes to restoring and certifying older watches. In recent years, there's been serious concerns about how Rolex handles restoration and authentication, especially for older timepieces. Rolex has a special department called the Atelier de Restauration. It's supposed to restore old Rolex watches with the original craftsmanship and correct parts. For decades, Rolex used strict rules. If a watch was found to be altered or changed with non-genuine parts, it would be rejected or marked in a way that made it clear it was no longer purely original. That was the rule that protected the heritage and history of rare watches, but recent reporting shows that those rules may not be followed strictly anymore. One shocking example was a report of Rolex restoring a vintage watch that had clear, fake features. In this case, experts could tell the watch had fake engravings and a dial that was not correct for the reference number of the watch. The Rolex restoration estimates provided a manufacturing year that did not match known production records, which meant even Rolex's own documentation was inaccurate. That fact raised eyebrows among collectors because a company like Rolex is expected to know exactly how and when its own products were made. Collectors are particularly worried because vintage watches are often worth far more money when they have all original components. When a vintage watch is restored with parts that are not original or with incorrect replacements, its value falls. The surprising part was that Rolex's official restoration facility accepted and serviced watches that had these incorrect features. Some of these watches were then certified or even sold under the idea that they were restored Rolex watches. This caused confusion in the vintage market, where trust matters more than most things. The controversy also involves something called Frankenwatches. These are watches made up of parts that never originally belonged together. A real Rolex movement might be placed into a case with a fake dial, or non-Rolex parts might be used for certain components while still carrying the Rolex name. Rolex has strict rules that any watch with non-genuine parts is no longer officially considered authentic. That is the rule Rolex itself enforces in trademark lawsuits, where the company has argued that replacing key parts with non-Rolex components makes a watch a counterfeit in the eyes of the law. Despite this policy, evidence shows that in the restoration and certification process, some watches with altered dials, fake engravings, and mismatched parts have been accepted into Rolex's official systems. Experts in the market have shown photos and records of watches that do not belong to any legitimate production timeline or model specification, yet were cleaned, serviced, and given official estimates by Rolex. These are not cheap pieces either. Some of these chronographs and rare models can fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. Alongside the restoration issues, there is another related program that Rolex runs called the Certified Pre-Owned program. This service was created so that customers could buy used Rolex watches that were checked for authenticity, serviced, and guaranteed by Rolex itself. In theory, this should give buyers peace of mind that they are purchasing a real, working Rolex. The company states that every watch in this program is inspected down to every component to confirm authenticity, and then it is tested and given a new 2-year guarantee. However, the very controversy about restoration raises questions about how true this certified pre-owned program can be. If watches with non-original or fake components are being accepted and restored by Rolex's own restoration workshops, then what does that mean for the confidence that people place in these certified pre-owned watches? Certification from Rolex should guarantee authenticity and originality. But if the same system is restoring watches with questionable components, then the value of that certification becomes unclear. Worse still, some collectors have stated that Rolex has not responded publicly to these concerns, even though experts have reached out to the company to offer help in identifying correct versus fake parts and to improve processes. The silence from Rolex in the face of mounting evidence makes many people wonder whether the company truly understands how deep these issues go, or whether it is simply ignoring them to protect its reputation. Meanwhile, the accusations do not end there. There are worse going on inside Rolex's internal structure: employee complaints and department crisis. Most of the time, when stories come out about Rolex, they are about watches and prices, not what happens inside the company. But in recent years, some unusual and serious issues have come to light about what it can be like to work at Rolex, especially in certain departments. These issues include reports from employees about difficult working conditions, allegations of harassment and mobbing, and even the reshuffling of leadership after complaints. These stories show a different side of the company, one that many people outside the watch world do not usually see. One of the major developments came when Rolex reshuffled leadership in one of its most important internal departments, after employees reported problems with how they were treated. Rolex has a division known as the World Service Department. This department manages the warranty and after-sales care of Rolex watches all over the world, and it is supposed to reflect the company's high standards. But according to union reports, some employees in this department said there was a breakdown in how work was done. They described a drop in working conditions, a situation that caused stress, early retirements, people going on sick leave, and other problems at work. Because of these reports, Rolex took action and reorganized the department, including ending contracts at different levels of its hierarchy. The union involved in reporting these issues was UNIA, which is the largest labor union in Switzerland. UNIA said employees had been speaking up about harassment and unfair treatment for some time, and that these problems had sometimes been ignored or dismissed by management. One former Rolex employee who became a focus of this controversy was referenced by name in union reports. He was called before a meeting where human resources confronted him with accusations that may not have been true. After he tried to defend himself and prove his case, he was eventually dismissed from the company. According to UNIA, The reasons given for his dismissal were changed and were not the original accusations, suggesting that the real motive may have been to punish him for speaking out about problems. The union noted that multiple managers and supervisors had been moved, placed on leave, or left the company after these complaints came to light. This suggested to some workers that there was a pattern of backlash against employees who challenged certain workplace practices or attempted to bring problems to human resources. Unia also pointed out that although internal and external investigations were carried out, the solutions were slow and did not always protect employees' well-being, which frustrated many of the workers who had hoped for real change. Another sign of internal trouble was that the Inspection of Work Authorities, OCIRT, had become involved. Both the employee and the union requested involvement from this outside organization because they felt that their reports and complaints were not being taken seriously by Rolex. The company opposed these requests in some cases, which the union described as an attack on workers' right to access information that concerned them. The fact that a large, global company like Rolex was resisting oversight from an outside authority raised serious questions about how much transparency and accountability existed within the company. Working conditions were another topic raised by past and present employees on platforms where anonymous reviews offer a look into what staff experience day to day. Several reviews describe the workplace culture as highly demanding and sometimes toxic. Some employees said that new workers did not receive training or guidance, leaving them to struggle without clear instructions. Asking for help, they reported, was often discouraged or mocked, making it difficult for people to learn and grow in their roles. People writing on the review site also mentioned that expectations could feel unclear and that staff were sometimes expected to know what to do without enough support. Feedback, when given, was reported to be harsh rather than constructive. When mistakes happened, workers said they were met with public criticism rather than understanding or help. One review specifically described the lack of support as stifling creativity and enthusiasm, and said that the pressure to maintain Rolex's external image sometimes came at the cost of internal morale. Work-life balance was another concern mentioned in employee reviews. Some people said that despite Porsche-like precision in craft and product quality, the expectations inside the company could feel endless. Punctuality and dedication to long hours were demanded in a way that left little room for personal time. And some staff said that requests to leave work at a reasonable time were questioned or discouraged. This kind of environment, according to some employees, could contribute to stress and burnout. Rolex, in its official reports, says the company takes workplace well-being seriously. According to its own sustainability documentation, Rolex has policies and resources aimed at supporting employees' personal and professional lives. The brand states that it has systems in place to prevent and address harassment, and that employees who experience problems can report issues through both internal and external channels. Rolex also mentions that it trains managers on topics like stress management, diversity, and inclusion, and has introduced anonymous reporting tools to help employees speak up if they face mistreatment. But despite these official policies, the reality described by workers and unions shows a gap between what is on paper and what employees sometimes experience at work. This gap has been at the heart of much of the tension, as workers feel that reporting a problem can bring negative consequences rather than support. These internal challenges have attracted attention outside Switzerland, partly because Rolex is such an iconic brand. Critics say that a company with a reputation for excellence in watchmaking should also have that same excellence in how it treats its employees. For now, the stories from workers and unions continue to show that even a brand as prestigious as Rolex isn't immune to struggles and challenges within the company. Yet, there has been a connection between these scandals and how it affects price and purchase. Enablement of gray market sales. In the luxury watch world, very few companies are as respected as Rolex. When someone works at a place that sells Rolex watches, that job is supposed to be special. Authorized dealers of Rolex must follow strict rules. But in recent years, a serious lawsuit from a former employee brought forward shocking allegations against one of those authorized dealers, and it created a big controversy in the world of luxury watches. The lawsuit did not accuse Rolex itself, but rather an authorized dealer of breaking laws and firing employees who tried to stop it. The firm at the center of this case, Peacock, a long-established jeweler based in Chicago that has been operating since the 1800s. Because it sells luxury watches in official Rolex boutiques, customers trust that everything done in the store follows Rolex's strict distribution rules. But in early 2021, a former employee filed a federal lawsuit against the company and several of its managers. Her complaint accused them of a secret scheme to sell Rolex watches illegally to gray market resellers, a practice that violates both store policy and federal laws. Gray market sales refer to selling products outside the official channels of the brand. In the watch world, this means selling watches to third-party dealers or overseas buyers rather than to regular customers who walk into the store. Gray market dealers often resell these luxury watches at much higher prices or without full manufacturer support. Rolex and its authorized dealers have strict agreements meant to prevent this kind of distribution. These rules are designed to protect the brand's reputation, keep prices stable, and ensure that watches go to genuine end buyers who appreciate them. According to the lawsuit, C.D., Peacock's management knowingly allowed employees to sell Rolex watches into this gray market for profit. The complaint said that the scheme involved more than simple sales. It included activities that may have violated federal laws, such as racketeering, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and even immigration law violations. Racketeering is a very serious accusation in United States law. It is normally used when there is a long-term pattern of illegal activity organized by a group. The employee alleged that when she and her coworkers noticed these illegal practices and reported them to their supervisors, instead of being supported, they were pushed out of the company. She claimed she was terminated from her job in December 2019 after refusing to participate in the alleged illegal activity and after trying to alert others about the situation. The lawsuit stated that she was fired under pretexts such as poor sales performance, even though she stated her real reason for being let go was that she would not take part in selling watches outside of proper channels. 2 other former employees were later added to the complaint, saying they also spoke up about the scheme and were fired in retaliation. One of them reportedly noticed the suspicious sales and internal actions involving Rolex watches and raised concerns with management. Another backed up the claims that being fired came after they tried to stop or report the alleged wrongdoing. These employees described feeling pressured to help shift watches in ways that violated both internal policy and Rolex's external distribution agreements. The lawsuit pointed to several specific practices that were allegedly part of the scheme. For example, it said that Rolex watches were offered for sale on social media platforms targeted at foreign buyers. These sales were reportedly made using a mix of credit card transactions and cash, and the complaint said that required tax reporting forms for large cash sales were never filed. The lawsuit also explained that one employee's hours were cut and access to inventory was restricted after she refused to go along with the gray market sales, suggesting that the store's management used internal controls to penalize honest employees. In response, Peacock strongly denied the allegations. The company said the claims were baseless and that it follows all guidelines outlined by the luxury brands it represents, including Rolex. The store's leadership maintained that any employees who were fired were let go for legitimate reasons, such as violation of company policies or poor performance, rather than for trying to stop illegal sales. Executives also said that the company values transparency and accountability in its business practices, and that it would defend itself vigorously in court. Rolex itself did not publicly comment on the lawsuit, which left many watch buyers and industry observers wondering how much the brand was involved. Rolex's distribution and dealer agreements are known to be strict, but enforcement often depends on the dealer's internal compliance and reporting. Rolex regularly sends secret shoppers and audits dealers to check that rules are being followed. But how a dealer actually manages its own inventory and sales can be hard for the brand to monitor closely. The importance of this case went beyond just one store in Chicago. It highlighted how demand for certain Rolex models far exceeds supply. making them extremely valuable. Some rare models sell for 2 or 3 times the retail price on the secondary market. Because of this imbalance, there is a strong financial incentive for anyone who can access inventory to find ways to move watches into higher-paying channels, including gray market resellers. Dealers and employees might be tempted by profit, creating conflicts with the brand's rules. Industry insiders have acknowledged that improper sales to the gray market are not unique to one store and can happen when dealers or salespeople see opportunities to profit from scarce inventory. In some cases, salespeople have been offered deals by outside resellers to funnel in-demand watches for a cut of the profit. These pressures put authorized dealers in a difficult position, especially when Rolex does not increase supply to meet demand. Even the policies passed by Rolex itself is not making things any better. Rolex's stance on servicing older watch models. For many people who love watches, owning a Rolex is a dream. Watches like the Submariner are symbols of achievement and stories people want to pass down in families. But in forums and review sites where collectors and owners talk openly, there has been a rising wave of frustration, disappointment, and even anger from the community. The backlash is not just about prices. It is about trust, value, and how long a watch can remain meaningful to someone who owns it. One major issue that many collectors complain about involves Rolex's stance on servicing older watches. Rolex officially states it will support watches with parts and labor available for at least 35 years after a model leaves the official catalog. After that, service is not guaranteed. Many loyal owners say this policy feels like a sharp shift from the traditional idea that a Rolex is a lifelong heirloom. Several industry experts and watchmakers explain that parts for older models simply run out, and Rolex service centers may refuse to work on certain vintage pieces. This refusal to service older watches has become a central point of frustration in online discussions. Owners of vintage Rolex watches report being turned away or being told that they must wait years until a service facility can handle their timepiece, which feels insulting to people who expected a long-term relationship with their watch. Some discussions express regret that Rolex could make such decisions for practical reasons, such as a lack of spare parts, but that collectors see this as a loss of brand promise, the same promise that made them invest in a Rolex in the first place. Collectors also talk about how difficult it is to authenticate watches they or friends have purchased. Many posts ask questions like, "Is this authentic?" especially when watches are bought from the gray market or social media sellers. Some new owners who thought they bought a real Rolex find themselves unsure and turn to online communities for help. The fear of having a fake watch is strong enough that people advise others to seek expert evaluations before completing purchases. The threat of fake watches and replica parts in circulation is another common theme. Even in official service centers, some fake watches are brought in by owners who only discover the issue when a professional inspects the internal movement. Others have warned that some people take advantage of the high prices and demand for Rolex watches to sell replicas or watches with mixed real and fake parts. The prevalence of these issues has created a deep sense of caution and suspicion among buyers. Collectors also describe frustration with how gray market pricing and limited supply affect the community. Many stories shared online are about people being placed on long waiting lists at authorized dealers, only to watch others buy the same model for large premiums before they get a call. Some comments go as far as to say the whole system around Rolex allocation feels like a scam. Not because the company is necessarily doing something illegal, but because the combination of limited supply and high demand creates big profits for resellers and frustration for fans. Others take issue with the lack of communication and transparency from restoration services. In some forums, members discuss long waits and poor updates from restoration or repair services. Some owners say they send watches for work and receive little or no information about the status, leading to worry about whether their valuable pieces are being cared for properly. This type of complaint shows that the frustration is not only about policy, but about everyday interactions with people and processes that owners believed they could trust with something precious. Beyond technical issues, some collectors express a deeper emotional disappointment in the direction the brand appears to be headed. Longtime fans argue that Rolex has shifted away from the kind of watches that originally attracted them, durable tool watches built to last and serve a purpose, toward models that emphasize status and resale value. Some feel this change has moved the brand away from its roots, making it harder for serious collectors to find joy in new releases or in the community surrounding the watches. This emotional reaction is strong in communities where people share their experiences over many years. Some describe seeing other brands embrace their vintage heritage more fully, servicing older watches and respecting their history, while they feel Rolex's approach seems distant or even dismissive. This contrast has drawn some collectors toward different brands, and it shows how deeply people think about the meaning of watch ownership beyond price and brand name. Complaints also reach formal channels. For example, some owners have filed complaints with consumer protection groups about service refusals when aftermarket parts are discovered, even when owners were willing to cover repair costs. These disputes paint a picture of customers who feel caught between wanting to preserve their watches and facing rigid policies that don't always seem fair to them. This has changed their relationship with the brand in ways that matter deeply to them. If this breakdown changed how you think about luxury, let us know in the comments. Which other issues have Rolex faced in the past? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden dynamics of wealth, status, and the brands desperately trying to capture both. Because in luxury, nothing is permanent.